Welcome everyone, and yes, my name is Adam Harris. I'm going to be having a look. Actually, I'm going to try a different format today. What I'm going to do is I'm going to include basically all the different asset classes, and then I'm also going to discuss, just spend a couple of minutes highlighting a couple of notable instruments that I'm going to be having a look at this week. So I'm going to start off now with the currencies. I'm going to start off with the US dollar index. And so I've been speaking recently about the fact that there was a bit of an inflection point going back here, and it was interesting to see so far that the US dollar is now weakening. It's now testing 90. If it breaks through that, my expectation is to see it this week continue down through 89. So that's really where my focus is going to be, is watching how it reacts to that 90 level, and then effectively continuing to expect or anticipate a weaker US dollar. But I do need to see how it reacts at this level. So Mondays are always an interesting day. It is Monday the 17th of May right now, and so it's interesting to see if Monday could potentially test this and then reject it. That's when I have a look and see if that 90 level holds. If I go across and have a look at the majors, again, you can see there's a little bit of I'll highlight it, there's a little bit of a band of resistance up here. So I'm just going to mark that in, because that's effectively what the dollar is going to be testing up against, or the euro is going to be testing up against the dollar in this area. If it breaks through that, then of course it makes sense that this longer term monthly trend is going to head up towards 1.23, and we'll continue to get a weaker US dollar. So looking here at sterling has actually broken through its key levels that I've identified in the past, but I'm going to mark this level because, of course, annoyingly so. When I say annoyingly, I just mean it's frustrating when you just kind of want the markets to keep going and they constantly have to kind of break through these levels, but that is unfortunately just the nature of the beast right now. So sterling is really going to be dealing with this level here about 1.4150, and I want to see it push and go through that. So again, needing to see that happen before I believe the market will continue to flow. And I do think it would be good for the markets, or just for traders in terms of opportunities, to just get that continued kind of one side at least weakening or strengthening, so we just get that move happening. And it's better for trading opportunities when the dollar knows which way it wants to go. If you could do me a kindness as well, please, if you've got any commentary that you want to add, anything you want to tell me or say, put it into the comment section. I will usually respond within 48 hours usually, and so I am interested to hear your feedback on these as well. So just noting here, looking at the Australian dollar against the US dollar, it's just this little band of resistance. It's really struggling to break through. Last week it had managed to push higher. It's coming back now, down now, and I want to see that, because that kind of implies potential Aussie dollar weakness. And so that is important. I want to see what happens with that. So actually, so far, the Euro and GBP looking like they really want to push a little bit higher, whereas Aussie and Kiwi so far actually struggling quite a bit with their key levels. And so these two now are hinting actually at US dollar strength. So we've got a little bit of a conflict there between the two. And so that's why we're going to have to, I would then be exercising caution this week, because there isn't really a clear signal just yet. Doesn't mean that maybe by tomorrow, by Tuesday or Wednesday, we won't then get that clarity, but that's the thing. I'm just going to be cautious until I get it. So this one, interesting, dollar yen here trying to push higher as well, coming back down to this tiny little intraday level, I beg your pardon, daily level here on the daily time frame. But I say intra level, it's just a minor support resistance level, not historically really that significant, but I want to see what happens here. So if we do find support here and then push back up, we could get that dollar strength. So that's again, no clarity there. Here we go. So dollar Susi here hinting largely at dollar weakness. Okay, so this is interesting. We've got a couple of them that are pushing and just showing that they're a little bit stronger against US dollar, and then the rest are showing that they're actually weaker. So that's fine. And dollar CAD, of course, having been an amazing trender for actually going all the way back even to 2020, more pretty much the last 12 months, just continuing it. So at some point it does need to hit a little bit higher. There's a little bit of bullish divergence here. Implication being this weekly might now be getting itchy for a little bit of a retracement, and that kind of hints again there at dollar strength. So we've got very much mixed results on that, and that is most likely going to filter out into some of the other asset classes. So let's have a look at gold. So I've reduced the number of things that I'm looking at in total. Gold here looks pretty much as though it is resuming that longer term uptrend. I'm going to disregard this potential trend line here with these highs. My expectation so far is that gold in the longer run, at least so far, is going to continue to climb higher, and therefore this is now for me ripe for the taking, meaning that as in I'm happy to participate in it, and I think that it's fair to expect it. It might potentially bob up and down as it goes, but I'm looking to see this hit back up to that 2000 level. Again, I'd be very interested on that. Make sure you just comment in the section below. Just let me know what your thoughts on any of these particular instruments. If there's anything you want to see more of, or less, or whatever that you're not interested in as well, just let me know. Okay, so silver here also ticking higher. Makes sense for me that that's going to be the case. The other one that's actually further down my list, which I'm going to come to later, but I wanted to comment on copper. So I'm going to do it now because we're looking at the metals. But copper's been trending beautifully, and this has really, without a doubt, been kind of the most profitable one to trade, certainly over the last year. Just so consistent and so stable, but is now almost certainly a little bit overextended on that monthly time frame and starting potentially, especially if we break the low of last week, potentially going to do a bit of a correction down to 425, and so I'll be keeping an eye out for that. But it needs to do that in order to kind of set up again to continue to climb to the upside. So a little bit of caution on that, and then I'll see how that ultimately unfolds. Okay, so then moving on and having a look at oils, moving away from metals. So as I said, I haven't mentioned the other ones because I don't really feel like they're worth mentioning at this time. I think copper just needs to take a bit of a break. I think gold and silver are looking pretty good. So West Texas, looking at US oil here. Okay, so the only thing that I am curious about is whether because we have these series of lower highs coming in on a much, much higher time frame, and if we, take into account that possibly at some point in the next decade or two, we might see that we sort of lean more towards other energy sources and away from fossil fuels. It is possible that we could see oil actually peak where it is now in terms of that, because maybe it's continuing to drop in the low highs. So this is why I'm going to be watching this with a lot of interest. Although in principle it looks really nice and bullish here, I am curious as to what the longer term aspect of it is. It is struggling here to break above that 65 level. It is bullish. I'm just going to keep in mind that the longer term, bigger picture could be changing, but so far it still looks like there are some potential long opportunities there. And again, same as I said last week, my expectation here is I don't see a lot of, unless we're going to start to develop a new level here, I don't really see a lot of historical resistance here, and therefore my expectation in the shorter term certainly is that crude, certainly Brent crude, has that potential to continue up a little bit higher. All right, and okay, so now what I want to do is I'm going to move across on to the indices. Let's have a look at the US indices. I'm going to do a little bit more on cryptos in a moment, but I'm going to finish off with that last. So let's have a look at the global indices. Okay, so we had a minor correction the week before. We had a really nice, this is a great weekly correction, but it's already kind of close up towards the top of that channel again, and we have got a little bit of a smaller candle at the moment. So overall looking really good. You can just see a lot of bearish divergence here, and so again what I'm going to be looking for here is to see if we this week, if we actually just continue, if we just almost immediately start to head lower today as opposed to breaking the high. If we do break the high, we start to head up a little bit higher, I'm happy to then maintain that bullish stance. But again, similar to what I've been saying the last couple of weeks, we are now in an area where we could see a bit of a bigger correction and therefore quite a bit of exhaustion. And so what it means is that in terms of practical trading for intraday opportunities, for example, it just means that my expectation is to be wary as we approach key levels, because we might find that there's a bit of a boost to the upside and then it kind of has a big drop. And I absolutely won't be trading, I'll be careful that I have a stop loss in place, because any big drops to the downside, I really don't want to be caught on the wrong side of those. But for the moment, as I said, everything looks bullish. It just is. You can just see that we sort of almost as though the last few weeks we've had a move up and then a little bit of a correction on the daily time frame, and then a move up. Then it recovers really well, and then there's a bit of a correction, and that sort of stumbling is where I'm seeing that as slightly higher risk. Okay, so the S&P as well also had a really good recovery last week. I'm very happy with this because for the most part we're letting off some of that buying pressure, which then allows us to continue higher. But we haven't escaped that monthly bigger picture. Okay, and this is something that will stand out when I have a look at the cryptos, when I talk about the cryptos, because here you can see that's finally taking a bit of a break, that it's been needing to do that. And so we're also going to need a correction here at some point. Okay, it's all normal. Whatever the reason will ultimately be that shows up, there's always going to be something in the headlines that does it. But again here, the Nasdaq still hasn't escaped this picture here, which is, this is really a sign, the slightly higher high but with the divergence is an indication of exhaustion. And so what I would really like to see happen here, and if it's inherently bullish, it's not going to do a very deep correction, but I'd love to see it come down to 12,000, tap that, and then have a nice little bullish candle similar to this one that kind of recovers off that. That's, for me, would be very healthy. 14,000 level is definitely still going to act as some form of resistance. And there's a daily downtrend here. So we have an uptrend on the weekly, we've got an uptrend on the monthly, but we do have a daily downtrend, and therefore the implication immediately on that is that we are in a weekly correction, all right, at the very least. And so we're still part of that. So again, that tells me I just do want to be cautious. Okay, then we have a look at the Nasdaq. So I pick up on the Russell 2000. This one has got a very strong level of resistance here. There's just no more buyers. It's showing lots of signs of exhaustion in this area. It's still within this band here. It's not very tradable, and here on the monthly time frame, it's showing a little bit of exhaustion there. So this is ripe in many ways. This is ripe for a beautiful correction down to 2000, and so that's what I'll have a look at. So moving away from the US markets, let's see what's going on outside the US. Let's go across to the UK. UK FTSE here looking beautiful on that daily, also having had a correction here. So there were some buy opportunities, and then it had a strong correction, and it's still recovering. It's had a really nice weekly correction. Overall, same thing. It's got to break to this little band of resistance here. I'm in principle, again, optimistic on the lower time frames, but we can't escape that monthly potential correction that looks like it's going to have to happen sometime soon. Then heading away to Germany, let's have the German DAX, have a look at that. So again, this was a really bullish kind of signal to me, finding some strong support there, pushing a little bit higher. Last week's and the previous week's candles really nice and bullish. But all of this, as I said, can happen kind of near the top. So to some degree, I think that they're a little bit vulnerable to whatever happens out of the US, but overall the market is still bullish. But I am noting bearish divergence here on the MACD. RSI is a little bit flat, so starting to become a little bit more bullish. So this is hinting at certainly at an enthusiasm to push a little bit higher. So then let's have a look at the Euro Stock Exchange as well. In terms of that index, so you can see again also a little bit more bullish. They're all just showing some signs of bearish divergence, but overall still bullish. So there's certainly below this level, there's a ton of buyers, just not necessarily above it. All right, then let's go into Japan, have a look at the Nikkei. So this in a solid downtrend, a really nice monthly correction here. This is very nice. This is what I would really like to see happen on some of the others. Just that kind of little bit of a correction down towards the moving averages, a little bit of a retracement, whether it's a 50% fib or anything, or 382, I'd be very happy with that. Just let off some of that longer term buying pressure and then take a look at this, or then allowing it to obviously then continue back up. So interesting to me that is now underway. The question then is what's going to happen with the rest, and then let's finish off with Australia. Let's have a look at that. So Australia, you can see a little bit of that exhaustion coming into that monthly candle at previous historical highs. Let's call it, I don't want to say 7,000, let's say 7,100, and a little bit of a bearish candle there on the weekly. The daily not able to get above this level that I drew in a while back. Okay, so all of that kind of hinting at possibly then there's a bit of a correction on that. So there's usually a high degree of correlation between these different indices around the world, with the US being the leader of the bunch, and actually within the US, obviously, it was the Nasdaq for the last couple of years. The Dow seems to be being a good indicator at the moment of the general, non-technology sectors, or at least additional sectors outside that. So this week, what it tells me again is that risk is still relatively high. It means I have to be more aggressive with my stop losses and taking profit, or just not participate at all, but that volatility is a greater risk. Right, so then let's move on to the digital commodities, Bitcoin. It's a Bitcoin I've been talking about for a while, finally seeing a bit of a correction. I'd like it to hit 40,000. So I think 40,000 is a decent level for this to correct to, and actually further would be acceptable. So it's obviously stressful for anyone who wants to participate in it. But if you imagine that this is a long-term game as opposed to a shorter-term thing, this has been long overdue. It has had a second bubble, which is very interesting to me to be able to witness that in my lifetime, see something that has two bubbles. Excuse me, but I'd like to see this kind of let off a lot of that ridiculous buying pressure, just to kind of take a breather, come down to 30,000, for example, and then bounce back up from that. So that's really what I'm going to be looking for in the near future. And so really what this is something that's similar. We go through these kind of spring, summer periods. We need a bit of a winter to shed some of that weight, and then we can get back into the longer term trend. So I'm still relatively comfortable with that, and Bitcoin is currently still the leader across the board. So generally everything else will have to follow through on that. You can see Ethereum here, it's had a bumper month, not produced a bearish candle, but however, if Bitcoin continues to drop, then it's likely that this particular monthly candle will actually show up as a strong rejection, and if that's the case, then could see a correction on Ethereum over the next 6 weeks down towards 2,000, or even further than that, down towards 1,400. So I would kind of see those as buying opportunities if the market goes back down to those levels. It seems kind of scary, but it is actually part of the natural order of things. So let's just have a look go through some of the others. Cardano, in no particular order, by the way, just more out of interest. This has also got a massive volume candle here, certainly due for a correction down to 1.5 if we're going to get that. Otherwise, it just looks overextended on the monthly. On the daily, it's gone a little bit parabolic, but it's not ridiculous. I don't think it's out of control. Let's have a look at Dogecoin. So this one is definitely showing some exhaustion here on the weekly. That monthly could end up being a strong rejection candle. So again, notice how on all of the ones I've looked at so far, the monthly candle has got this exhaustion here at the top. And so all of that really being that indication across the board that cryptos are, potentially people are taking some profit and waiting for it to come, start to resume that uptrend. Here we've got a really nice, currently bearish inside candle, lots of exhaustion on the weekly. And so Ripple might also then be looking at a little bit of a correction down, especially because it's bumped its head up here against previous levels of resistance and a bit of a move down, even towards sort of halfway down would be just nice to shed some of that. So you can see just similar types of exhaustion there. And finally, let's finish off on NEO. So NEO is interesting here because of course we've got that level of resistance. It's just going to mark that here. You can see that we managed to push through very strong rejection of that, and of course we have a lower high here on both of these momentum indicators, just signifying quite a strong rejection of that. I'll want to see how that monthly goes, sorry, I beg your pardon, that weekly chart goes in terms of producing a bullish candle, but based off the color and shape and size of this monthly candle, it's indicating that there's potentially going to be a bigger knock to the downside. So that's it, pretty much across all the cryptos, strong bearish signs on that monthly, and I want to see kind of how that ultimately plays out. All right, so finishing off on my notable currencies that I quite like the look of. Euro yen is, although it is coming up against resistance here at 133, this is a really, really nice chart structure. It's a little bit overextended on the weekly. It's heading into solid overextension on the monthly. I quite like the look of this. I'm just going to be prepared that at some point this trend is going to run out. If it does break through this level, come back and test it, there might be some good buying opportunities there. Sterling against the Japanese yen as well, also looking good in that particular case. Like the fact that it's pushed through 152, and there could be some potential buying opportunities if it pulls back into the moving averages here on to the rest of the week. Aussie CAD looking nice and bearish. So actually here's some really nice potential even intraday shorting opportunities. Looking nice and bearish, although it is technically in an uptrend on the monthly. We've so far got higher lows. Once we break this, I think price is coming down to test that support, and that's not really a sign of strength, that's a sign of weakness. So if we do break through that, then I think we have a good clean run down to 0.91, and therefore some good shorting opportunities. And finishing off, Swiss yen, the last currency on my list, so far also looking pretty good. It's now entering overextended on the weekly. Monthly not looking so bad because it actually had a nice consolidation here and broke through, so that's got some potential to head up a little bit higher. But some nice little pullbacks here. I think I may certainly be keeping an eye out for buying opportunities there. So I'll just reorder this, saying basically the yen crosses for me looking more bullish than bearish, and Aussie CAD looking nice and weak. Those are my favorites in terms of that. I've discussed copper. Now let's just have a quick look out of interest at Tesla, Apple, couple of others. So here we have almost potentially got a confirmed downtrend if we break through this level of support, and you can actually see Tesla on the monthly coming back into this area. So this is a pretty decent area for it to potentially find a little bit of support. Again, I'd love for it to have a deeper correction down towards 400, but this is a nice area in which it can turn around. So what I'm going to be looking for here, which can only take place over the next kind of 2 to 8 weeks, is looking for a nice bullish candle that might give me a hint that the buyers are then coming back in the longer term. And therefore there's that potential for that change, but I don't expect to see that in the coming week. Apple. So Apple as well really struggling so far with this level of resistance, but this is a bullish breakout setup, so if it can consolidate long enough on this one, it'll ultimately break out through that. So that's what I'll be looking for there. On the other hand, should price break below the low of this previous low, so this is a higher low here, so this is higher than this one. If we break the low of this, then I would see almost immediately, I would expect price to start to head down towards testing these previous lows and heading down towards 100. So not really seeing any trading opportunities there right now, but just trying to walk through what the longer term plan is on that. Wells Fargo, I just thought I'd mention this more out of interest. That's just a really, really nice daily chart. There's a really good weekly chart, sort of towards the top of the channel, but not ridiculously overextended, and that's a really big recovery, similar to the oil charts on the monthly. As it heads in towards resistance at $50 here, then it wouldn't surprise me if it did need to have a bit of a deeper correction back down towards that 40. But overall, looking pretty good. So that was it. I just scanned across all the different things. I might separately do a futures commodities market scan. Wanted to try the new format. If there is an instrument that you want me to do an analysis on, just write into the comment section, let me know, and I will do that. Absolutely more than happy to go ahead and do that. So I thought I changed up the format here, and if you did enjoy, please let me know. And that's it. I want to wish you a fantastic week, and I will see you in the next video, which is in the next week.